What's up, guys? I wanted to make a video talking about how I hit 2000 rapid on chess.com and kind of what my process looked like along the way. So you can see here, I made it to 2002 in rapid. And so basically, my process involved playing about 1 to 2 games per day in the longest format possible. It involved about 5 to 10 puzzles, usually about 10 puzzles on chess.com, and weekly lessons with a coach who is a much stronger player than I was. So my coach at the time was a FIDE candidate master. So one of the reasons for playing a longer format game was that I wanted to um, I wanted to basically improve as fast as possible. And what I had heard from strong players and people who knew about chess improvement, basically the longer the time format, the better it is for chess improvement. And this seemed to be true in my experience too, because I was able to, formulate kind of my thought processes better. I could spend more time. I would blunder less. And I'm sure anyone who's played like blitz chess, for example, can attest. You just basically playing on impulse and autopilot a lot of time in blitz. And in a longer format, it's much easier to like double check whether your move is strong and to consider like more strategic ideas and generally just to make stronger moves. So I feel like also kind of keeping the games to like 2 games per day max was useful because it seemed to kind of help with playing on tilt. So there was always this like reset and like a mental reset and spending like 24 hours before games kind of gave like myself a chance to kind of basically come back fresh the next day. And I think this is partly what allowed me to get a lot out of the games that I was playing because I wasn't basically just like playing a game and forgetting about it. I would also try to analyze. I probably analyzed maybe 95% of the games that I played, and that was a key part of my improvement as well. So what I found actually in terms of like game analysis, what really works best for me is to play the game and then basically take like the PGN and copy paste that into a Lichess study. So you can see here, this is just a bullet game. But if I go here, I can click on PGN. I can copy paste the PGN and put it into a Lichess study, and it will just show up with all the moves um, in the Lichess study. And so then I would go and like add little notes in places that felt like key moments or places where I didn't really know what to do or where my opening knowledge kind of started falling apart. And then after I had all these notes in the Lichess study, I would then turn on the engine and then compare my notes to what the engine thought. And this seemed to work best for kind of getting like as much meat out of the bone on a particular chess game in terms of chess improvement. So as I mentioned, also I would meet once per week with a coach, and this was actually really useful. We focused a lot on game analysis, and it's just an interesting experience for me playing with like a much stronger or analyzing a game with a much stronger player because certain things became obvious to him that weren't obvious to me even after like 5 or 10 minutes thinking about a position. And so just having like someone who has much stronger chess intuition point out various things that I could have done differently or various awkward moves that like he would probably try to avoid making that I didn't even consider were mistakes. Having those highlighted was really useful because then I would come into my next game and have this recollection of this conversation I had with my coach and then try to apply like like oh like don't just randomly give up an isolated pawn for no reason, or don't put your knight in this awkward place where you can't free it up and it becomes useless the rest of the game. So yeah, game analysis was a key part of improving through our lessons, and also maybe on a more psychological level, it's just kind of nice to have a friend to talk to about chess and to have someone who's like supporting me. I felt like if I didn't have a coach and didn't have any community of chess at all and was just playing online, I would feel probably lonelier, and I don't think I would improve as fast because it seems really important to have outside inputs also on my chess. So one of the things that I learned from my coach, which I didn't really realize when I started playing chess, that you could really do is it's called blunder checking. And blunder checking is a process where you're trying to like disprove the move you're about to make before you make it, in the hopes of realizing ahead of time if it's a good move or not. And the way you can blunder check is you will just um, play out the move in your mind, and then you will look at your opponent's possible legal checks. So you look at all legal checks in response to that move, and then you also look at your opponent's active pieces. Say that they have an active knight, queen, and bishop, and you're just going to look at the captures those pieces can take, or the attacking moves that they can make. And then if once you've gone through that sort of checklist, if you haven't run into any issues, and often you will, maybe even the first check you see will be like, oh yeah, I just blundered my knight. But if you make it through that process, then you're much you've you're much safer to play the move that you'd like to play. And oftentimes this will weed out a lot of blunders that you might not have otherwise caught. So, and this kind of ties into the next point I wanted to make, which is like that I learned throughout this process that adult chess improvement is definitely possible. And I kind of grew up thinking that chess was a game of natural talent, and I'd look at young kids beating up on grown men and be like, okay, like this kid is way more talented. That's the reason this kid is winning. But I don't necessarily know that that's true now. For example, a lot of kids are playing in tournaments often, have coaches, and practice a ton. And just because you're an adult doesn't necessarily mean that you have more experience than the kid, although you have the capacity to have if you put in the time and effort. And I also saw that, as I could see clear benchmarks, like basically my rating going up, getting wins over stronger players, I could tell that I was improving. So it became not just an abstraction, but it was like I could experience it on a day-to-day basis that I was getting stronger. Um, so I thought in particular that like tactical strength, calculation, visualization, these were just innate things that you couldn't improve. And then especially through puzzles, I improved a lot tactically, and that was disproven as well. So I wanted to also show a game. I guess at the time I was rated 1348 in Rapid. This was, I think, in 2021 or about 2021. So let's just take a look, and I'm gonna just kind of illustrate the kind of like silly moves that I made, um, that kind of highlight the progress that happened over time. Because if you take a look at this game, it's very clear that I wasn't anywhere close to a 2000 level player at the time, and it shows the kind of improvement that was made. So I guess I was playing the Sicilian back in the day. I've now switched to the Caro-Kann. So I don't really know any theory about the Sicilian now. But I just wanted to point out this move. So I'm not sure if you can tell why this would be a blunder, but I spent about 14, 15 seconds on this move, and it's pretty clear I didn't blunder check because there's literally only two legal checks after this move, right? There's bishop b5 check and there's queen a5 check. So if I had looked at queen a5 check, I would be able to tell that this was a big blunder, because after this move, I'm being forked, and black has just lost here, down a whole knight. So kind of a beginner type mistake here. You can watch as the game continues. Black is just, it's like -3 I'll close to, because just I'm down a knight here. But gaining the center, developing pieces. Ben Feingold says never play f3 here. It seems to support the center, and it's not so easy to attack the king on this diagonal, so it doesn't seem like a huge issue here. Also gains a tempo on the bishop. So I guess I'm going kamikaze, and I think actually the engine likes these pawn pushes, because what are you going to do? You've got to play aggressively when you're down a piece in chess. So blunder here from the opponent. Now the bishop can be trapped. Looks like a reasonable move, because black should be trying to get his king out of the center, so castles would be a nice follow-up to this. Here is like another kind of move I just would not play at this current time, because I noticed my king's in the center and I can finally castle. So I would just get my king to safety before getting these pawns rolling. I'm basically opening up the position with my king stuck in the center, which is generally something you want to avoid in chess. Finally get castle. You can also notice this pawn grab here. White has this check, and now suddenly it's really uncomfortable to play as black because I've opened up the position and my king is very uncomfortable. It would much rather be on c8 castle than it can go to b8. My opponent misses as well, so I get let off the hook. Shouldn't have been allowed to castle here after these mistakes I made. It's kind of a weird move. Missing the possibility that the rook can exchange here, and I just wasted a tempo. Here's another blunder. I'm simply giving up the knight. I'm just hanging a knight here. Then also did not blunder check here, so I've got 15 minutes on the clock, so I could easily be spending more time on these moves. But after bishop b5 check, black just loses. So yeah, that's just kind of an interesting game, I thought, because it shows, you know, how weak I was as a chess player only what 3 or 4 years ago. You know, probably closer to 4 or 5 years ago. But I'm 31 now, so it's a clear example of kind of improvement made as an adult. I wasn't given anything from growing older through 26 to 31. It was all just the work that I put in. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about 2 more things before I wrap up this video. And one of the things is that I had a really long rating plateau in the 1800s. So from as far as I can tell, what I wrote down in my notes is that I actually plateaued in the 1800 rapid range for close to 2 years. So from February 2023 until February 24th, 2025, it's like exactly 2 years, I was in the 1800s. And I was playing a lot of chess at this point, you know, doing regular lessons, and I was pretty frustrated. I was like, why am I not improving? Like, maybe it's true that adults can't improve at chess. Which I think misses the mark in a few ways, because 1800s is already much, much stronger than the level I showed in that game I just showed you guys. But also, I think it shows how much the rating can lag sometimes. Like, even though my rating was plateaued, I was improving because when I eventually made it through to 1900, I then made it to 2000 within just like 4 months. So I was improving through that 1800 range. It just wasn't showing in my rating yet. And I think that's an important takeaway, that like, you know, the rating's going to follow. It's going to lag behind you as you improve. So just focusing on improvement, in my experience, was the best way for me to make it to 2000 ELO. It wasn't about fixating on the rating. And then one other part of this process that seemed really helpful was I went to the Petaluma Chess Club and played against strong opponents there. There's one kid in particular who was, I would say, quite a bit stronger than me, who I would battle against and lose to over and over and over again. And that made me a better player. I also played in a few USCF tournaments. And, you know, one of the things I learned from my coach is that one of the best ways to improve at chess is actually to play tournaments. And so, yeah, that was like an important lesson on the process as well. So, yeah, there was a lot of times where I would doubt whether it was possible for me to make it to 2000. And it was kind of a surreal experience. I felt elated when I did eventually make it. So I don't think it was necessarily due to you know, so much natural talent. I think most people, if you have average talent in chess, I think you could make it to 2000 with a similar process. I just think a lot of people that play chess either don't care too much about improvement or don't know how to improve in like a systematic way. And so hopefully this kind of process I had, you know, playing 1 or 2 games a day, rapid, long time format, 10 puzzles a day, reviewing the puzzles too, especially the ones I got wrong, and then meeting with the coach and playing tournaments. I think these are really useful ways to improve. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful for you or interesting to watch. And the journey doesn't end here for me. I'm now trying to become a national master, so I'm trying to focus more on more USCF tournaments and trying to get to that level. So I know it's going to be quite a journey still to come, but it's one I'm excited about. And yeah, so thanks for watching this video. I hope it was useful or interesting, and talk to you guys later.